Hey everyone, and welcome back. 2024 is right around the corner, and with the election getting closer, it feels like immigration is making headlines again.
It always seems to be top of mind during election cycles.
Right. Especially a question of what will happen to undocumented immigrants who haven't committed any crimes.
Yeah, I think a lot of folks are feeling unsure about what the future holds for them.
Well, we are diving into a video from U.S. Immigration News today, and it dives right into all of that. And they even say this question resonates with millions of families living in uncertainty.
That's a powerful statement.
It really is. And it gets even more interesting because the source claims this whole debate is heating up with the possibility of Donald Trump returning to the White House.
Oh yeah, his potential return definitely has a lot of people on edge.
So how much can we actually learn from the past administrations about what might happen to immigration policy if he is elected? I mean, every president has their own approach, right?
Yeah, for sure. But looking back, it's clear that things kind of swing back and forth between stricter enforcement and more lenient policies.
Makes sense.
But I think the biggest takeaway is that we're in a moment of tremendous uncertainty right now. And that's what's feeding a lot of anxiety for undocumented immigrants, regardless of whether they've done anything wrong or not.
And it's not just talk either, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the video actually mentions this thing called the Security Clearance Review Act that House Democrats introduced.
Oh, yeah. That's a direct response to all the concerns about how much power the president actually has when it comes to immigration.
And on the flip side, the Senate's been busy confirming judges' right.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to lock in what they see as a balanced judiciary,
Right.
especially with the potential for big policy shifts after the election.
You can really see both sides already kind of positioning themselves.
Yeah, they know what's at stake, for sure.
So we got all this political tension, and then the source throws out this idea of mass deportations, which honestly sounds pretty overwhelming to me. Is that even possible? Logistically, I mean...
Well, the video actually brings up some serious doubts about that, the feasibility of mass deportations.
Okay, good.
I mean, for starters, the U.S. immigration court system is already overloaded.
Oh, I bet.
I think there's like a backlog of nearly 4 million cases.
Wow.
Can you imagine adding millions more on top of that? The system would just collapse.
It would implode.
Yeah. And then there's the cost factor, right?
The money, yeah.
The source mentioned a price tag of something like $88 billion a year for mass deportations.
$88 billion. Where would that even come from?
Exactly.
That's a massive question.
And then you've got legal hurdles too, like the Posse Comitatus Act.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Which basically restricts using the military for domestic law enforcement.
Right.
Trump has actually referenced historical examples like Operation Wetback.
I was just going to say, that's what I thought of.
Which took place back in the 50s, but things have changed a lot since then.
Totally different.
Public opinion and the legal landscape are completely different.
It's not as easy as just copying and pasting from the past.
Yeah, you can't just do that.
Okay, so even if there was the money and the political willpower, it sounds like there are still some major logistical and legal roadblocks.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
But I have to ask about the human element of all this.
Yeah.
The source mentions all these real human stories, and it makes you wonder, what would mass deportations actually mean for people and communities? It's got to be a tough question to answer.
It really is. This is where human rights groups get really concerned. They're worried about families being torn apart, about communities being destabilized,
Right.
and this idea that there would just be this pervasive fear of authority,
Oh, I see.
taking root. And I think that's a really valid concern.
It's understandable.
Yeah.
The source also brought up something I thought was really interesting about sanctuary cities,
Oh, yeah.
like Los Angeles and New York,
Yeah, they're like the two big examples that people always use.
and how they're basically resisting these efforts to cooperate with the feds on deportations.
Right.
They're claiming it actually helps keep those cities safer. What do you make of that argument?
Well, the idea is that if undocumented immigrants are constantly worried about being deported, they're less likely to report crimes.
Oh, that makes
Or
sense.
even help the police.
Interesting.
So the argument is that by cracking down, you could actually see crime go up.
That's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very complex issue with a lot of different facets.
It's not as simple as just rounding people up and sending them back.
No, not at all.
So the source also claims that undocumented immigrants play a pretty big role in the U.S. economy. Is there any truth to that? I mean, what would happen if they were all deported?
Well, there is actually a lot of evidence to back that claim up.
Really?
A lot of studies have shown that undocumented immigrants are a key part of our workforce,
I can see that.
especially in industries like agriculture and construction. And
Hospitality.
Right.
Does that make sense?
And if you took those people out of the equation, you'd definitely see labor shortages
I
and
bet.
higher costs for businesses.
Which would trickle down to the consumer, right?
Absolutely. And the source even points out that undocumented immigrants often pay taxes.
Really?
Yeah, they contribute to Social Security and Medicare,
Wow.
even though they might not ever benefit from those programs.
Okay.
And if you deport them, you lose that revenue, which further harms the economy.
So it's not just a humanitarian issue, it's an economic issue as well.
It is. Deporting millions of people would be disruptive to families, communities, and entire industries.
It would have ripple effects everywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
The cost would be enormous.
Yeah,
So what about the argument that they're using up social services?
that's something you hear a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially from people who support stricter immigration policies,
Right.
but it's actually more nuanced than that.
Interesting.
So while it is true that some undocumented immigrants access social services,
Yeah.
studies have shown that they often pay more in taxes than they take in benefits.
So that argument's not really accurate.
It's kind of an oversimplification.
It is.
And it's important to remember that many of them are working and contributing to the system, even if they're not eligible for all the same programs.
So we've talked about the legal hurdles and the human cost and the economic impact of deporting all these people.
It's a lot.
It is. What about the political reality, though? I mean, is there any middle ground here, or are we just totally stuck?
That is the big question. And the source really highlights how different the approaches are from Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
And with 2024 around the corner, yeah, it's hard to see a path forward that everyone's happy with.
So you've got Trump and his supporters pushing for stronger border security and maybe even mass deportations.
Right.
And then you have the Democrats, who seem more focused on human rights and finding a way to give undocumented immigrants a path to citizenship.
Yeah.
It's like those are two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Those positions are pretty far apart, but the source does point out that there might be some room for compromise on certain things,
Like what?
like finding ways to make legal immigration easier.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, because the current system is so slow and complicated.
It is.
Maybe by simplifying it, you could reduce the number of people who come here undocumented in the first place.
That's a good point. So even if there is agreement on that, what do you do with all the people who are already here, the millions who are undocumented?
That's the real challenge, right? That's at the heart of this whole debate.
It is, and I don't see an easy solution.
No, it's not going to be easy to find something that works for everyone. The source does remind us, though, that this isn't just about policy, it's about people's lives.
It is.
Real families and real communities.
Whose futures hang in the balance
Exactly.
with this huge political battle going on.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is. It's fascinating to look back at the history of this debate
It is.
because it feels like we're seeing the same patterns repeating themselves. The video we're looking at from U.S. Immigration News actually mentioned President Eisenhower's Operation Wetback,
Oh, yeah.
which happened way back in the 1950s.
Right.
And some people are actually pointing to that as an example of how we should handle immigration today.
Well, it's important to remember that Operation Wetback is really controversial.
It is.
Oh, yeah. It was basically mass deportations.
Oh, wow.
Mostly of Mexican immigrants.
Okay.
And a lot of the methods they used were considered pretty inhumane.
I-
And they even violated people's rights.
So even though some are holding it up as a good example, it sounds like it's not something we should be repeating.
Exactly. Things were different back then, socially and politically.
Right.
There's a much stronger emphasis on due process now and on human rights.
That makes sense.
If you tried to do something like Operation Wetback today, you'd probably face a lot of legal challenges and a ton of backlash from the public.
Probably so.
Yeah.
It seems like this idea of presidents using their executive power to make big changes to immigration policy keeps coming up. The source talked about how the Senate's rushing to confirm judges.
Yeah.
And it makes me wonder if that's part of some strategy to stop those kinds of moves.
It's an interesting thought, for sure. The courts play a huge role
They do.
in interpreting and enforcing immigration laws.
Right.
So yeah, the makeup of the courts can definitely impact how those policies are actually put into practice and whether they're even legal.
So it's like this chess match with each side trying to guess what the other's going to do
Yeah.
and position themselves to have the upper hand.
That's a great way to put it, yeah.
And in the meantime, millions of people are just waiting to see what happens.
The stakes are high, for sure.
The source really emphasizes how much uncertainty all those undocumented immigrants are dealing with.
Yeah.
Especially as we get closer to 2024.
There's a lot of pressure.
So let's go back to the economics of all this for a minute. The video claimed that undocumented immigrants are a big part of the U.S. economy,
Yeah.
and deporting them could have some serious consequences.
Well, there's plenty of data to back that up.
There is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There have been a bunch of studies that show undocumented immigrants are a key part of the workforce,
Yeah.
especially in industries like agriculture, construction, hospitality.
Right. Those make sense.
And if you suddenly took those people out of the picture, you'd have all these labor shortages,
I
the
bet.
higher costs for businesses.
Which would obviously affect consumers too.
For sure.
Everything would get more expensive.
It would. And on top of that, the source mentioned that a lot of undocumented immigrants actually pay taxes.
Really?
Yeah, they contribute to Social Security, Medicare.
Wow. I did not realize that.
And if you deport them, you're also losing out on all that tax revenue,
Right.
which hurts the economy even more.
So this isn't just about humanitarian concerns then, it's an economic issue too.
It is, absolutely.
Deporting millions of people could seriously disrupt the whole country.
For sure. We're talking about families, communities, entire industries.
Yeah.
The cost would be huge.
Huge. What about the argument though that undocumented immigrants are using up social services? I feel like I hear that a lot.
Yeah, you do hear that a lot, especially from folks who are pushing for tougher immigration policies.
Right.
But like a lot of things in this debate, it's just more complicated than that.
Oh, okay, so it's not so black and white.
Right.
So is it true that some undocumented immigrants do use social services?
Some do, yeah.
Okay.
But studies have shown that they tend to pay more in taxes than they actually receive in benefits.
So that argument's not really accurate then.
It's kind of an oversimplification.
Okay. And a lot of them are working and contributing to the system, even if they can't access all the same programs.
That's right.
Okay, so we've covered the legal challenges, the human costs, the economic fallout from mass deportations.
A lot.
But what about the political side of things? Is there any common ground to be found, or are we just totally at a standstill?
It's the big question, isn't it? And the source was pretty clear about the differences between the Democrats and Republicans.
Yeah.
And with the election looming, yeah, it's hard to see how we get past this.
So on the one hand, you've got Trump and his base who want to see stricter border control and maybe even those mass deportations.
Right.
And then you've got the Democrats who are generally more focused on human rights and figuring out a way to give undocumented immigrants a path to citizenship.
Yeah, they want to see some kind of path to legal status.
It seems like those are two completely opposite approaches.
Yeah, those positions are pretty far apart right now. But the source did mention that there might be some room for compromise on certain things.
Like what?
Things like streamlining the legal immigration process, making it easier.
Oh, that makes sense. The current system is so slow and complicated.
It is. So yeah, maybe if you simplify it, you could reduce the number of people who end up coming here illegally.
That's a good point.
But even if everyone could agree on that, the big question is still, what do you do about the millions of undocumented immigrants who are already here?
That's the heart of it all, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. It's going to be tough to find an answer everyone can live with.
I just keep thinking about what the source said. That this isn't just about abstract policies, it's about people's lives.
It is.
It's about families, workers, neighbors.
People who are part of our communities.
Exactly.
Their futures are hanging in the balance.
And the clock is, that's definitely something to think about. In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to look at the role public opinion plays in all this.
Oh, interesting.
You know, should politicians just follow the polls?
Yeah.
Or do they have a responsibility to lead and educate people, even if it's about something as complicated as immigration?
Yeah.
Welcome back for the final part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we?
We have.
From the history of immigration to the challenges facing undocumented immigrants today.
It's complicated.
It is. And we ended the last part talking about public opinion and how much sway it should have on policy.
Yeah, that's always a tricky one.
It is.
Yeah.
Should politicians just follow the polls? Or do they have a duty to lead and educate, even if it means making unpopular decisions?
It's tempting to say just follow the polls, keep everyone happy, right?
Right.
But it's just not that simple.
No.
Public opinion can be all over the place.
Oh, yeah.
Driven by fear sometimes. Misinformation,
Definitely.
short-term thinking.
Yeah. And immigration is one of those things that needs careful consideration.
It does. You have to think about the long-term consequences and sometimes make tough choices, even if they're not popular.
So you're saying leaders have to be willing to make those hard calls?
Sometimes, yeah, because they have access to information and expertise that most people don't.
Right.
Part of their job is to explain things to the public, to make those nuances clear,
Yeah.
and to help people understand what might happen if we go down one road or another.
It's a tough balancing act, though, isn't it?
It is.
Especially in today's political climate.
Yeah, one wrong move and it could cost you votes.
Or your job, even.
It takes courage to stand up for what you think is right,
It does.
even when it's not the popular opinion, to think about the long term instead of just what's good for your career right now. But that's what real leadership is.
The source we've been looking at focused a lot on how anxious undocumented immigrants are feeling right now, especially those who haven't committed any crimes. And as we head into 2024, that's only going to increase. Yeah, it is.
So is there any way to address those concerns without resorting to mass deportations or something extreme like that?
One idea that's been gaining traction is this thing called earned legalization.
Earned legalization. I haven't heard of that.
It basically gives undocumented immigrants a path to citizenship,
Okay.
but they have to meet certain requirements first.
Like what?
Paying taxes, having a clean record, learning English.
So it's like rewarding people who are already contributing members of society, but also making sure they're not a threat.
Exactly. It acknowledges that a lot of undocumented immigrants are already part of our communities and they're contributing to the economy.
Right.
Deportation just doesn't make sense in a lot of cases.
Practically or morally, I guess.
Right.
But wouldn't something like that just encourage more people to come here illegally, hoping they can eventually qualify for legalization?
That's the argument you hear a lot.
Yeah.
But there's research that shows that's not really what drives illegal immigration.
I mean, most people who come here undocumented are running from something.
Violence.
Violence,
Us.
poverty, persecution. They're not thinking about some potential program down the line.
They're just trying to survive.
They are.
It seems like a lot of this comes down to values, doesn't it?
It does.
Some people care more about border security and national sovereignty, and others are more focused on compassion and human rights.
Exactly. Finding a way to bridge that divide, that's the challenge.
If we want an immigration system that's actually fair,
And humane.
this video has really driven home the point that this isn't just some abstract debate. This is about people's lives.
It is.
Real families, real communities.
People who deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their immigration status.
Absolutely. Well, this deep dive has been quite a journey.
It has.
We've explored so many facets of this issue.
The history, the laws, the economic side of it,
The human cost,
and some really big questions too. About what it means to be American.
what we owe to others.
How to balance security with compassion.
Tough questions, but important ones.
So important, and we need to keep having these conversations.
Thoughtful conversation.
Nuanced conversations.
Yeah.
Avoiding easy answers and inflammatory rhetoric.
Because we need to create an immigration system that actually reflects our values.
One that's fair, humane, just.
That's a good goal to strive for.
It is.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive. Keep learning, everyone. Challenge your own assumptions. Talk to people who see things differently than you do.
It's how we build a better future for everyone.
Thanks for joining us.
Hello everyone, welcome back to our channel US Immigration News. We hope you are doing great. Well, in today's video, we will be talking about the path to the presidency and the undocumented immigration with a clean record or risk of deportations. Undocumented immigrants in the United States face the renewed anxiety over the potential mass deportations promises by Donald Trump during his campaign. Trump's proposed to plan the use of military assist of these deportations as raises significant logistical, legal, and economic changes, along with the involving the Foreign Economic Act that 1798 is a technically feasible. Experts argue that such as a measure are the implementation duty are limited facility and the overwhelmed immigration court system with the nearly 4 million pending cases and the immense cost of the estimated 88 billion annually. Deporting the million of the individual would be required resources beyond the current capabilities while the completing the international relations as some countries may rise receiving the deported citizens. Trump's focus appeared to be on the tracing undocumented immigrants with the criminal record estimating the around the 460,000 individuals fitting with this profit. However, there is a growing concern that efforts might be extended beyond the series efforts, affecting law-abiding and residents with deep roots in the U.S. various cities, especially sanctuary cities like the Los Angeles, have the pluck not to cooperate with the federal deportations efforts, reflecting a border tensions between state and the federal authorities. These cities argue that the local police resources should not be delivered and diverted for the enforced federal immigration law, impasses the community safety and the trust over the aggressive enforcement. Cities highlighted the human and economic cost of the mass deportations, the labor provided by the undocumented immigration in the integrated the several sector, including the agriculture, constructions, and the hospitality. Removing the millions of the workers could be the safely distribute these industries leading to economic stability. Additionally, the mass deportations could be break the apart family. Many of the whole we have the mixed immigration status, leaving the children and the legal reason without the citizen critical support. Political opposition by the Trump's plans is strong, particularly among the Democrats and the immigration advocacy group. The emphasis to need for the comprehensive immigration reform over the opponent measures. Human rights organizations continue to advocate for the protections to the immigration rights, stating the undocumented individual contribute the positively and the society and should not live in the constant fear. These organizations argue the legal pathway to the citizenship and the policies are the reflect is a U.S. value and the inclusively and the opportunity. They are also concerned about the abuse and exploitations of the immigrations. The climate of the fear created by the potential deportations may the lead of the increase in instigate with the undocumented individuals are the threats and the text word. Some fears are the environmental and could be the defer immigrants and thus reporting crimes of the cooperating and the law enforcement undermining the community safety. The debate extends via the federal-state dynamic with the states and the California preparing the resist federal enforcement actions. California police, including the sanctuary laws and the aim to the protect the undocumented residents and they provide a butters against the federal overreach. Officials argue that the corporation with the federal department's efforts and the ensure the public trust and harm local communities. In the conclusion, while the Trump's master deportations retorted and has a reignited fear among the undocumented immigrations, particle legals and the ethical options make the large-scale implementation changings. There are ongoing debates replace borders, trends, and political debates, dividends with their significant implication and immigrants communities in their national future of immigration policy. Thank you for the watching entire video.